This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry. What has happened in Post Shifters? Welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. Today's a little bit different. Lately, with everything that's been going on, I hope you've been enjoying the episodes every single day, Monday to Friday. I haven't been doing anything on the weekends because I just want to try and focus on my next week on the weekends, but I hope that all the information that you've been getting is worthwhile and has been helpful for you all. Today's episode is with Brad Bodnarchuk from Vancouver, Half a Dozen Hospitality. So he is a fellow consultant in Vancouver. A couple of weeks ago, we sat down and had a chat via Zoom and just talked about the industry, how things are changing, and my opinions on it. So I don't don't get interviewed this way. So it was a nice change of pace for me. I hope it's a good change of pace for you. I hope you enjoy this episode, guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Just like that as we proceed. And we out here, luxurious limoncellos, what we bout here.
Okay, we're off. Shawn Soole, welcome to the Half Dozen Hospitality Podcast, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So I reached out to a whack of people in our space, in our industry, the hospitality industry, through social media on all the platforms. And Shawn was one of the very first people to get back to me and say, I'm paraphrasing here a bit, Shawn, but it's something like, whatever you need, I'm there, which is, for me, such a hospitable, if you will, thing to say. So I want to thank you so much for being available.
That's because I'm in Victoria.
What's that?
It's because I'm in Victoria. It's the Victoria mentality.
Yeah.
Just tell me what you need.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate the Victoria rubbing off on you then. So for myself, because you and I just know each other through our interactions on social media, we haven't had the chance of sitting down in person yet. So this is our first real interaction. So help me and the listeners before we dive deep into what I want to talk about and ideally what you want to talk about as well. Help myself and listeners understand better who you are, what you do, why you do what you do, and where you're at today, what your reality is today.
I always class myself as a bartender, regardless of what I do. I'm always going to be a bartender, I think. Now I'm more classed as a hospitality consultant. I consult on restaurants and bars now all over the world. But I wrote a book last year. I do a whole bunch of stuff, but it's always in the hospitality scope. And I think the big thing that I do with my company is look at the gaps in the market and where things are going to grow in maybe a year, 2 years, and sort of extrapolate out what I want to do, start building now to line up with distilleries and wineries and breweries and that sort of thing in 2 years' time. And so I started a lot of things when I got back from Singapore last year. I was in Singapore for 4 months, opening 3 venues in a space of 4.5, 5 months. And so I partner up with a lot of great people. So I've got a graphic designer that I work with for my design side of things, do like restaurant design and branding and logo design and stuff like that. I have a little distribution company that distributes BC craft distilleries. I have my passion projects, which is BC Spirits and the Post Shift Podcast. And then I'm just about to start a big sort of media play when it comes to online marketing for craft distilleries in BC.
Oh, so cool. When is that dropping?
As soon as we can, because it's a big, it sort of builds on the BC Spirits. My passion project with BC Spirits is about it being a level playing field for all distilleries in the province. We have 80 distilleries. So it's geared towards tastings and cocktails and videos and sort of more tourism marketing sort of area. And this other big one is creating quite a large third-party online top-of-the-funnel style liquor store for craft spirits, where it's a one-stop shop where you can go click, click, click from 3 different distilleries. You pay one order fee, and then it'll split into the distilleries, and commissions will be taken, and they'll get their money, and we'll get our money, and away we go.
Awesome, man. I feel like that's like the way the world is going, and especially what's going on right now. I don't know why I'm laughing, but I guess at a time like this, all you can kind of do is laugh. But what I mean by that is it seems like there's so much power in the online presence for our industry and people adapting to that a bit and seeing how they can take their business, whether it's a barbecue joint or a liquor store or a bakery, and seeing how can we adapt this a bit so it's online friendly and we can
100%.
really manipulate that side of the industry.
Well, because I think the thing is like I've seen it as we progress with like third-party delivery orders and online platforms and stuff like that. People are still pulling back from that, going, "Oh, we know we want to be a brick and mortar store and we don't want to adapt." I'm like, well, the consumer's adapting to something new. Like the consumer's moving in this direction. You need to move with it. And looking at everything that's happened with the coronavirus now is like it's sort of forced everybody's hand. So you got restaurants who would have never thought about doing takeout and delivery 6 months ago, all of a sudden going, shit, we need to now because like we have to.
There's no other option. Can we
so
just go ahead.
I see it as a sort of a great step in the right direction because I've talked to so many clients, I'm sure you do too, about like, oh, I don't want to do skip the dishes or Uber Eats or they take too much of a cut, which I think they do, but that's a whole different story. But you have to adapt, and because the consumer's chasing that, they're chasing convenience.
Yeah, I know that's what I'm afraid of, and I don't know. I don't want to call myself like a savant at all, but I kind of saw this coming a bit, not in this way, in this form, not in this global pandemic virus that was basically completely taking the bottom out of this industry and many others. Mm-hmm. But for so long, I thought like this has to change somehow, some way, but I was afraid of it changing to the point of what you and I just discussed is this kind of online trend or this third-party delivery trend where not everyone, the majority of people that are coming up, like the 20-somethings that have that disposable income they're not as likely to go out and like dine and experience what I define personally as hospitality. So I'm afraid of, and I've been afraid of for some time, that my daughter, who's just about to turn 2 years this summer, that her idea of what hospitality is will be a lot different than what you and I might have experienced in the past 10, 15 years.
Most definitely. And I think the thing is with that cost of housing and stuff like that, and if you even rent, I think a lot of those mid-20s to early 30s, they're like, well, why am I going to go out when I can just get the same food delivered to my house, hang out with my friends in my house because I've paid for a huge amount of money for it.
Right.
You know, like on the flip side with the hospitality, I think once I'd like to see how the spring back's going to happen once this is all over and we go back to it, and we're going to lose some restaurants and there's going to be a big talent pool out there, how hospitality is going to come back because people are going to have that forcibly taken away from them. They have no choice. So they have to be forcibly taken away from actually having experienced it while they're dying. Mm-hmm. And now they're going to be chasing that experience. And I think it might, to a degree, reset the restaurant industry a lot in the way of the hospitality experience, because then people are going to go, okay, well, I've been in lockdown for 2.5, 3 months. I want to have the greatest experience I can possibly have. I'm not just going out to eat. I want to go out and dine.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, man. I truly hope that you're right, because I want that to be. I think something you just said popped into my head before you and I hopped on here is maybe this will, and I don't want to throw shade at any certain business or any part of the industry, but there's been a thorn in my side for some time with, I don't want to say like the hipster spots, but places where I feel like when I walk into them, and this is not just in our city, this is across our nation and it goes everywhere, but it's almost like we're inconveniencing them. And that was like the cool theme is like, it's the inconvenience restaurant or the inconvenience cafe. It's like, oh man, you want to order a coffee? Like
the Portlandia? The Portlandia style service?
Yeah, exactly. So I think to your point is like, this is going to really make people in our industry, those that want to keep partaking in it, like they're going to have to really up their game. But with that, and what I keep pushing, and I would assume you would be on board with this as well, is we need to use platforms like this podcast, like your podcast, the consulting work that you do, the books that you produce, which we'll get into as well. We need to use these platforms to help educate the general public of, hey guys, like dining out shouldn't actually be cheap. Good food shouldn't actually be cheap. Good booze shouldn't actually be cheap. A good cocktail should, like, we need to educate people. I feel that's our responsibility as people that are kind of on like the periphery of the industry, if you will, that have maybe a little bit more of a voice or time to have a voice and say like, hey, general public, that dish that you spent $18 on before the coronavirus hit the world, guess what? It's now 23, but it's got to be that way if you want to go out and dine at Joe's Cafe.
Yeah, and I think that's been something that's been leading, like the work pay dichotomy between the front of house and back of house, cost of living, all these sort of things have been leading towards this. And I think, again, not to take away from the COVID-19, because I think we're going to say a lot of things that are possibly they're going to come out of the positive out of all this. Not to take away that the restaurants are going to shut and all that sort of stuff, but I think we've been leading towards this about like minimum wage and kitchen staff being looked after and all these things that I think it's going to reset that to a degree where people start understanding how much food. Well, I'm hoping. I'm still privy to a few messages from restaurants and restaurants that are trying to do to-goes and stuff because they're Facebook messages and stuff. And some people's lack of understanding about the whole new system of like to-go and delivery is mind-boggling, the lack of thought that goes into it. Mm-hmm. But I think the reset will happen where you'll have a ton of educated staff in the pool. You'll have owners who want to bring everybody in. It's going to reset to being more of a symbiotic relationship, which I don't think has been in the industry for a really long time. Like, it's really great restaurateurs talk about the symbiotic relationship, but it's almost still forced to a degree. You got to win the customer over. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping it gets away from that parasitic nature of like, go in, eat the McDonald's, Burger King style, like, you feed me, I leave, sort of mentality.
Yeah, and I think that's my fear. Like I was saying, my fear is, and again, I'm not throwing any shade towards the QSRs, the quick service restaurants out there, like the Tractors and the Railtown cafes in this city and others that do so well. But it's like for me, that's not hospitality. That's just like, you walk in, you order number 7 on the menu, you go down a line, you sit down at your table by yourself with your phone probably. Don't interact with anyone, eat your chicken salad and leave. And that's your exposure to that brand, or to that business. That's it. Whereas if I was to sit down at Shawn's bar and actually like engage with you, I'm going to get the service. I'm going to get some stories. I'm going to get interaction. I'm going to get to see you like craft the cocktail, all those things. So I'm hoping that the general public, again, is open to investing time and money into this industry when we come out of this. And I feel like as detrimental as this has been to this industry and many others, there has to be positives from this. And I think this is the reset that we needed in our industry, albeit a very dramatic and drastic one, but one that I think is desperately needed. And I don't want to see any restaurant close. Like I don't care if I love your food or I don't. I don't want to see anyone close because I love what restaurants do for our cities. But those ones that are relentless are going to be the ones that survive, and hopefully the ones that start to, again, really increase that level of what a restaurant is and what it should be. And then people you don't need to justify why your cocktails are $14, $15, $16. Do you know what I mean?
But I also think the government's going to be a driving force behind that as well. Mm-hmm. I think the government and the packages they're going to be putting out for employees as well as owners is going to shine light directly, because you're going to have a lot of owners come out and go, well, the bailout the government's giving us isn't enough. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to have people really understanding the slim margins, and 75% of the wages getting covered is great, and a little bit of money here, and minimum wage, especially with $2,000 a month for what CREB or whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. That's barely enough for a lot of people who live in Vancouver and Victoria and Toronto, right. Especially in the hospitality industry. So I think that's going to open up a lot of people's eyes as well, just the cost of living. Because I think a lot of the times they're just like, oh, you make tips. You make so many tips.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, for those of you that are listening abroad, just we have a couple people that listen kind of overseas. So our government, like a few other more, like I'll say, progressive governments. I don't want to make this a political show right now, but they've introduced and increased what was a 10% wage subsidy to a 75% wage subsidy. They're also talking about $40,000 loan guaranteed. So from the banks, our major banks in Canada, but guaranteed by the government. 10,000 of that. Feel free to jump in here, Sean, if you know anything else that I don't. 10,000 of that may be forgivable, and I think that was kind of. Oh, and then the $2,000 a month for 4 months if you apply. If you kind of tick certain boxes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't count if you're on unemployment insurance.
I think if you go on EI, it's going to click straight over.
Oh, okay, there you go.
That's what I've heard, is that if you're on EI right now, it's just going to click straight over to that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I feel like again that they've done, like, it's a great effort, and I think it's amazing, and it will allow for a lot of I know my clients that had shut and fired, had let some people go, are now reintroducing those people back into their work, which is great.
Nice.
So it's working, but like you said, this is going to shine a light on the fact that this industry is too vulnerable. This industry is too vulnerable because those margins are so slim. This is a month-to-month cash flow business. Like they need bums and seats on 4 Fridays in a row, and the Thursdays and the Saturdays and the Sundays as well. Otherwise, they can't pay their fixed costs and they can't pay their variable costs as well. So I'm hoping somehow, some way, this looks different.
Well, I think that's the big thing as well. Like I've heard closing numbers from pretty much everybody from the BCRFA and a few other, like the Distillery Guild. And it's not the big guys. It's not the guys who've got the big restaurants, and it's not the mom and pop shops. It's the 80% of restaurants that are in the middle, the middle ones that have like medium, like our clients, the medium-sized staff, and that's the thing that have all been laid off, and they're the ones that scrape by every single day.
Yeah, it's crazy. So can I ask? We don't have to share names, but have you? And I'll share some stories as well of clients that I have. But have you any clients that were currently on your roster that called you up and they're like, "Hey, Sean, like, sorry, dude, like you're out because we're out."
Pretty much straight away.
Yeah.
Pretty much straight away. I had a few small restaurants that I was working on redoing all their back of house finance stuff that were just like, yeah, sorry, we can't spend any money now. And I still advise them and say, like, you need to shut down that restaurant and just focus on these two and that sort of thing. I'm doing a little bit of work with my clients in Singapore because Singapore still hasn't locked down yet. You can still dine in and go to bars and restaurants in Singapore, which is really weird for me because they got more cases earlier on than we did. So I was talking to them the other day. I was like, you need to get onto Go's like takeout now. Like start doing your Facebook advertising, start doing your social media posts and stuff like that. Get on Grab Food and get your to-go food rolling now because it's going to happen. And you're going to get locked down and you're going to be one step behind. And in Singapore, there's no liquor laws too, so you can basically sell everything.
Right.
Packaged cocktails. It's incredible there. But no, I've had a couple. But again, on the flip side, I've lost a contract from them, but I'm still advising them to a degree about like just to make sure that they get through it, because without them, I don't have a contract on the other end either. Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, it's been a lot of tough conversations, and not so much from an economic standpoint for me personally. Not that I'm sitting here like rolling in dough. I'm literally recording this podcast in my front hall closet with like toilet paper behind me. But I was more than willing to say like, yeah, guys, like obviously let's just put pause on the contract and this is all good. And hopefully we can come back from this and resume. But I'm always there for them. And if I can, Sean, like if you guys listening to this podcast, and we'll put Sean's contact information in here, like reach out to either one of us if you have a question about what you're doing or how you're doing it. I'm pretty sure both Sean and I are more than willing to give you any.
100%. Your podcast the other day was gut wrenching for me. I was actually walking through the park. I think you posted that night, which is why I jumped on it straight away, because I was walking through the park and I only listen to audiobooks or podcasts, and you're one of only the other podcasts that I listen to outside of Gary Vee. And it was a short one. And I was out having a cigar with the dog, taking the dog for a walk, and I was just like, oh, I felt it because I've had so many conversations with so many friends and restaurateurs, and we literally we did a podcast, a big long podcast, like a State of the Union for Victoria's restaurant scene, a week before the lockdowns happened.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like everybody was sort of like sort of semi-socially distancing already, but we did this big, like 5 of us panel discussion talking about Victoria's restaurant scene, and we addressed a lot of the issues. And then, like literally the day it got posted, it got locked down.
Wow, crazy! Isn't it crazy? Like this is our reality right now. But I feel lucky that you and I can have this conversation, because I feel like it's people like you that I wanna pick the brain of and have the opportunity for other people, general public and industry folk, to listen to what you have to share, because I think it's of value. And I know, like you said off the top, what you do kind of in your business model is you kind of pride yourself on being able to look like a year or two out and then adapt your business and offer that to your potential clients or your clients. So if we can pontificate right now a bit, what do things look like in Shawn's crystal ball? And it's very difficult to say, but give us kind of best case scenario, worst case scenario. What are you thinking is going to happen, Shawn?
This is after your podcast the other day. That's what got me really thinking, because I think you were seeing it the same way, as like trying to just perceive the macro right now is so difficult, because there is a lot of stuff coming from the government coming down, but there's no mechanisms for it right yet. There's a lot of stuff coming from Restaurants Canada. There's a lot of stuff from CPBA, and I'm talking to a couple of the guys this week just about initiatives and hospitality outreach and stuff like that. But there's no mechanisms in place yet. So looking at the macro is quite difficult. I'm trying to work in the micro to hopefully tweak as much as I can for my friends and clients and stuff, to try and like keep the costs down, maximize what you can do. The legislation change for selling alcohol was a big one for me, and a lot of them are like, well, I don't want to lose money. I'm like, yeah, but you've got stock on hand, you've paid for, it's on your credit card. If you make 10% on that, it's gone, and you've got your cash back. I'm like, you need to just think about moving stock and turning that into cash as quickly as possible. Optimistically, I think that this is going to continue for another 6 to 10 weeks. Honestly, I think until it really goes back to normal. And then I think summer's shot. I think we're going to be looking at like August, September before we start getting back to like solid figures. In that time, we're going to have a lot of wineries close. I've heard 25% of wineries in BC will shut. Wow. 100 breweries will shut. 25% of distilleries will shut. 45 to 60% of restaurants and bars will shut. And so they're the sort of figures that I'm getting from the BCRFA and the Craft Distillers Guild and stuff. Which again, it's going to be a big dip, but then it does unsaturate the market to a certain degree. So it does bring a little bit of equilibrium to the choices and stuff like that. Same thing with the restaurants. Like when we talk about I see it as when we talk about the 45-60% shut rate of restaurants right now, all in our head, we start going to like our favorite places and like the mainstream places and the places that have names and brands and that sort of thing. But really a big chunk of that's going to be the mom and pop Asian place noodle place on the corner, and that cafe that really only sells a couple of coffees and is just really is mom and pop working, and they just whatever profits they make is their salary sort of thing. So like that number really, when we cut it down to like restaurants that we know, is going to be a little bit slimmer. But I think in the micro right now, if bars and restaurants are doing their best to try and do this, to adapt it to go, adapt to takeout, try and maximize that. I'm talking to a lot of them about social media marketing because it is very, very cheap right now. Instagram, social, and Facebook in your little world of like really where delivery can go to is a very small circle with a lot of people in it. And for $25 for 5 days, you can hit 10,000 people, so, and this is another thing that they don't like online, talking about online earlier, is like, they weren't thinking about social media marketing before. Most of them don't know how to do it. Most of them, if you're a big guy, you've got a marketing person to do it. So I think in the micro, we just need to double down on this to go and take out and liquor to go and wine to go and stuff. In the macro, ask every person that you owe money to take a cut. Your landlord, your services, credit card processing, everything you can possibly get money from. And everybody's like, well, what if they say no? I'm like, you asked though.
Yeah, you have to ask. Yeah. It's like you never know if a girl wants to. Yeah. You never know. You never know if that girl's gonna want to go on a date with you if you don't ask her out first. So you gotta ask first. Has there been anything that you've seen that you can share with myself and listeners, whether local or abroad? Because obviously your scope is so big with who you work with and kind of what you're watching. Has there been anything really innovative that you're like, wow, that is or was awesome, just in regards to our current reality? Obviously, adding the alcohol capabilities here in BC and in Canada. Is this BC?
Pretty much all of Canada is close to it now.
Okay, so the idea here, guys, is that
I think from our little bubble, the cocktail kits have really changed a lot of people's perceptions.
Right.
I think everybody, again, they want that hospitality. I think it's a arm's reach piece of hospitality. You know, like, you can't come to us, but like, here's a bag of like the juice, the syrup, garnishes, get yourself some rum, you're good to go. Like at Pagliacci's just yesterday, we, because we have a huge amount of inventory, we actually put together full bottle package cocktail kits. So full bottle of gin, full bottle of Cinzano Rosso, full bottle of Campari, because it's Pagliacci's. We had so much swag from the staff party last year that we literally divvied up swag. So for, I think it was $90, you got a bottle of gin, Cinzano, and Campari, four Campari Negroni glasses, 2 T-shirts, and there you go.
That's
and
perfect.
So they sold one at 5:30 in the afternoon. Yeah. So I think it's just taking the rules, adapting the best you can within the rules, because I've had to deal with this for licensing a little bit with a few people, because the liquor board has basically said, we're going to give you this, but if we see you like screwing around with it, we're going to close your place down until the end of this. And at the bottom of all the memos, which is an interesting takeaway for like the macro, how long this is going to last, the liquor board said everything's July 15th is like when the go laws change. Like that's a pretty big reach for the BC liquor board to be like going, okay, well, this is going to last till then. Yeah.
Wow.
So they're not saying like, oh, we'll do it for a month and then we'll reassess in a month's time. They're like, look, July 15th.
Yeah. That's impressive. And like you said, that's big for them to do. Because again, giving context here, I don't know how you perceive the BC Liquor Board, but I sold beer for 5.5 years. And it was always like an uphill battle, just like to get certain things passed. And I find this is to be a very progressive opportunity for this industry. And I applaud the government and the liquor segment of that government to do something like this, because it had to be done, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure.
Great.
ABLBC, Jeff, the president of ABLBC, and Ian from BCRFA have been putting a huge amount of hours in. And I think that you're going to see a lot of legislation changes for the BC Liquor Board coming down the pipe, because all the stuff that we've wanted for the last 5-10 years is on-premise restaurants. Buying from private liquor stores, wholesale pricing, stuff like that, that's technically stimulus when you look at it. On the other end of this, you want private liquor stores to still exist. You want bars and restaurants to have that little bit of kickback that they're not paying that little bit extra. So I think you're going to see a lot of legislation that we've wanted for a long time coming back to us. But we also have to be very aware that the liquor board and the BC liquor stores give a huge amount. All those taxes basically go to hospitals and medical and stuff like that. So we have to be very aware that the BC liquor stores sell a huge amount of product, and they, like, I think someone told me last week the LCBO last week did $20 million in sales.
Holy heck.
In Ontario, 20 million in sales.
Wow.
That's insane.
That is a crazy. I'm not a drinker, so I find it really difficult to even wrap my head around what $20 million of alcohol sales would even look like.
It's a lot of Mickeys of Smirnoff.
That is a lot of Mickeys of Smirnoff. I wanted to quickly chat about a conversation I had with a prominent chef here in the city a couple weeks ago. And this is before all of this happened. This is before this was like our reality. Things were pretty normal. So normal being the industry was broken still. And we were talking about like, how do we do things? Like I'm talking about, how do we get people to pay more for that halibut dish? How do we get people to understand that it's worth more? And who's going to be the first person to like jump on and do that? Meaning charge $23 for that burger as opposed to $16. And this chef was like, I'm definitely not going to do it, because if I do it, they're just going to go down the street and get a burger down there. So do you know of anyone or a group of people, like a silo of businesses that are willing to be like the martyrs that say like, hey guys, enough is enough. Like we're done with making 3 or 5%, and that's pretty good. We need to be making 12 to 15% at the end of the year. So guess what? We gotta raise our prices.
I think you're going to see a lot of alliances. It's going to be sort of like a Survivor at the end of all this. Like there's going to be a lot of alliances, like Gastown will have an alliance, Seattle will have an alliance. I think it's necessary. I think as an industry, we're always like buddy, not competing against each other. But like there's always such doing that down the street, so I got to do that $2 cheaper, and I got to do this for this and this for this. And so I think a co-op and a partnership between a group of restaurants as a figurehead, and then market the hell out of it,
Right.
PR and market the hell out of it, and say like we're done with price gouging and stuff like that. I've always found it very interesting because like your franchise restaurants, and I'm not going to name which ones. Like I'll go to a franchise restaurant and have a meal, and I'll pay the same amount of money as I would if I was at Brasserie Le Col in Chinatown, which I'd always go to Brasserie Le Col over it. And I'm like, but it's not as good. Like the service isn't that good, and the wine selection is not as good, and the cuts of steak aren't so good. But it's still packed, Right. So, I find franchise restaurant price dichotomy to the independents is so very, very odd. Like people are happy to pay like $20 for a burger in a chain, no problems in the world with cheap bellinis and like girls in high heels and stuff.
Right.
But then you go to an independent and you're sure as hell will know you'll find a Yelp review that says, I can't believe I paid $20 for a burger.
Yeah, and it's crazy that the chains, and let's not just crap all over chains here, but it's crazy that the chains will do that when we know, just because we know that their buying power is way better than that mom and pop. So then their margins on that $20 burger are substantially bigger than that margin on that mom and pop shop, but they're forced to charge $20 because those guys are. So it's like we need to start helping each other out. And that's what I was saying earlier about I want to use this platform. I want to I don't care if I got to use my personal Instagram or whatever. Like I want to help this industry, make this industry work. And I had this conversation with the cafe owner this morning, and he said this word. He said, we've been far too vulnerable. We can't be if we want to move forward. And that's just what this has shown up for a lot of people is. This industry is far too vulnerable. And I want to get it to a place as best I can where if something like this happens again, God forbid, we don't have to, as an industry, go to the government for a bailout. Mm-hmm. Right? Because not every industry does that.
I think getting the BCRFA on board, I know they just did a big video yesterday on Eat by Local BC. They did a video on there about restaurant owners really talking, being very frank. I also think there needs to be a little bit of authenticity and vulnerability with restaurant owners now. I think for a long time, pride, and we're very prideful. Like we're people pleasers. Like that's why we're in the hospitality industry. Like we don't get into it for money, because I wouldn't have got into hospitality if it was for the money. We do it to please people, and that's why when we do get reviews, it guts us, because it's like you've especially as an owner or a manager who's putting in 60, 70, 80 hours a week, you get there first thing in the morning, you mop the toilets, and you do a little accounting, and you do a run to the bank, and you do a liquor run, and then you do service, and then that one person writes a shitty review, and you're just like, oh, you just don't know how much work I put into this to make you even relatively walk through my door. Yeah. And so I think we need to see. I think Trevor Bird's been fantastic. His Facebook posts have been absolutely awesome. Yeah. I think as a hospitality industry, I think we need to be more vulnerable and more authentic about just what sort of shitty positions we're in sometimes. And if I think we show that as a core group, like you were saying, it'll show the macro, the people that aren't plugged into our little social media bubble, just what we go through.
Yeah. There was actually an article that Eater did a while ago that I thought was so ingenious, and it was so great of this restaurateur to partake in it. And I think it was titled, I'll put it in the show notes, but I think it was titled What It Costs to Open a Restaurant. And this was a San Francisco restaurant, and they broke down everything. And it was amazing to give context to, and I kind of know because I've been through a few opens, but it's the general public again, and this is no fault of theirs because no one's really telling the story of guys, this is what it takes. you want to have a beautiful room and beautiful food with beautiful music and beautiful lighting and beautiful people, like that costs a lot of money.
And then roll that over to your break-even point. Roll that over to your break-even point and figure out exactly how many covers you have to do at this much dollars per head just to break even for the evening.
Exactly, which is crazy. Which is great, like you were saying. Like, why would you even want to do that business if it was break-even? That's why I think it has to change. So I'm encouraged that it will, and I'm encouraged that, and I mean this sincerely, that people in this industry have people like you who have this wealth of knowledge and this creativity and go like, hey guys, like, yeah, things are bad, but we can pivot here and make this work. And the fact that you have the ability to speak to people in Singapore who at this current moment as it sits on the 29th of March aren't, as you're saying, aren't nearly as bad as we are in North America, so they can get ahead of the curve a little bit and kind of beat this thing by adapting and pivoting now. So this industry is lucky to have people like you and the restaurateurs and chefs and dishwashers that are just willing to gut this out as much as they possibly can. So shout out to you and those people. I appreciate
Thank you, sir.
Let's change speeds just for a little bit.
Yep.
I was unaware that you were an author until a couple weeks ago. So let's talk about the book. Let's promote the book. It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
And I want to know how that came to be, what that process was like, and how much fan mail you get every day.
So I did my very first book in 2013, and that was called Cocktail Culture, and it was just about Victoria's cocktail scene, which at the time for a publisher to back a first-time author on a book about Victoria's cocktail scene was just made no sense, like at all. I think she found me out of a Westworld article or a BC Coast article and hit me up on Facebook. Then about 2015, 2016, I started getting the itch again. And so I was like, you know what, I've wanted to do one of these similar style books for all of Canada for a really long time, where we talk about the background of the bartender, their cocktail, that sort of thing. And so I started in 2016 trying to get publishers for it. So I went to 13 publishers, and all of them said no. They were like, Canada cocktails, that's a little bit of an oxymoron. Like, what else you got? And like, no, this is the book I really want to do. And then finally, I reached out to a friend who I didn't even consider reaching out to. They published all of Gary Reagan's books before he passed on, and a whole bunch of other books, Mixellany in the UK of all places. And they were like, genius, let's do it. And literally in a space of 2 days, I had a contract signed, done. Yeah. So it was like 13 laborious months of trying to find a publisher. And then in 2 days, it was like, I remember I was sitting in my hammock writing emails in the backyard in summer. And she's like, yeah, done, cool. I'm like, okay. And then, of course,
cool story. Actually, that in itself is a great story for anyone out there. If we can pivot for a second, just say like, hey, if you're trying to do something right now, a podcast or YouTube channel or a restaurant or whatever, like, do not give up. Sorry, keep going.
Oh, no, you can't. And that's just the thing is, like, I think the stories that you hear, like Eater and stuff like that, about like Death and Company's book and Jeffrey Morgenthaler, who's a good friend, so we had a chat about his book and stuff. Like, I think everybody thinks it just falls in your lap. Like, you get to a certain echelon of bartender fame and someone's going to come to you and go, here's $100,000 check and here's a contract. And so I try and demystify that, because especially in the Canadian market, like, we get in our little social media bubbles of how awesome our cities are, but really outside of that like bubble, people don't really know much about Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal and Halifax and Victoria and Edmonton, Calgary. So I got to start writing the book, which was a labor of love, to say the least, because when you try to wrangle up 150 bartenders across the country in a space of, I went from signing the contract to the book being published in 13 months.
Wow. The number 13 shows up a lot for you.
What's that?
The number 13 shows up a lot.
It does. And so from September 2018 to October 2019, when we launched, I had to compile 150 bartenders and then do edits And like, so in May, I was on vacation with the family and I had my computer with me and I was like, because everybody sends different recipes, you got to reformat all the recipes.
Right.
Mixed Lane is a very small publishing house, so I had to really like do a lot of the work before that went to them, and then launched. And so I'd get to a stage where I'd have bartenders and I'd be like, okay, so I got to Facebook this bartender, email this bartender, Instagram this bartender to try and get this one like bio and recipe from them. And it was like a constant like battle. And then you finally get something, you have to edit it down, ask some questions. And then we published in October last year, and it's done very well. The publisher's happy, and we don't have a huge amount of budget. I think when we launched it in October, I was just coming back from Singapore. I launched it in Singapore before I left. I did a little bit of book tour on the West Coast here, but then, of course, you got Christmas, comes real quick, and nobody has plans to do anything in January, February. Then this came. I was supposed to do a big tour again, like around this time, and that all stopped. So then we find, again, like 5 distributors before a distributor in Canada would pick us up. Like, wow. So just to get us in Indigo, like I had to go and find a distributor myself. So even though it's my second book and with a relatively well-known publisher, it was still a huge amount of work for me to do it by myself as well.
Well, kudos to you, man. I'm looking forward to grabbing a copy. Like I said, I'm a teetotaler myself. I'm not a drinker, but I think it'd be smart for me to have it on hand so I could, mix up a few Canadian cocktails for guests when I'm hosting them in my home.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm going to start working on the second edition probably in September and launch that again next year. And I'm probably going to add another 50 bartenders to it. So for some reason, I think that this is always a good idea after I absolutely hate the process. And then I'm like, you know what? I can do it again. I can do it again. It's fine.
You're a glutton for punishment, my friend.
Pretty much.
I haven't done this for a while because I've actually been doing a lot of solo podcasting. So I haven't actually hosted anyone for some time. So I haven't put them through this gauntlet, and I'm going to put you through it if you don't mind. So the show, as you know, is called the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast. So for you, Shawn, I have 2 questions that I ask every single guest. And
okay.
you mentioned Trevor Bird. He was on back in like the very first days of the podcast. He's answered this question. These questions, pardon me. We've had some great answers to these very simple questions. So I'll ask you them, and you can give it your best shot. So the first one is the half a dozen have-tos. So stay with me here. What I need from you is 1 to 6, so 1 to half a dozen. You can do 1 or you can do 6 of your personal have-tos, which means something you experienced in your life that you feel like our listeners have to do, whether it's a trip you've taken, a book you've read, a song you've listened to, a meal you've eaten. So hospitality-related, cocktail-related, food-related, or not, what would be 1 to 6 of your have-to items?
This one's going to be a bit soppy even for me. Find someone that accepts you without trying to understand you.
Deep. I like it.
My wife is an amazing woman, and she's put up with like 2 closures, multiple venues, like ups and downs, depression, the whole shebang. But she doesn't try to understand me. She's given up on that, but she accepts me for anything I do. When I say I want to do more work, she's like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know why, but yeah, okay, knock yourself out. Your very first cocktail book, the very first one that when you walk into a bookstore, and I've still got my very first cocktail book. It's scrawled in. I've had it since 1998. Wow. I still reference it. It's all horrible fucking cocktails that if I did an 80s list before. 6 things. Exploring cigars and whiskey.
Okay.
Is a big one. I think a lot of hospitality people missed out on that because we were at the cusp where smoking stopped.
Right.
In bars and restaurants. And before, when I started in the industry, that was a big part of it. Like, you had to learn your cigars, you had to learn how whiskey paired with it, the whole shebang. And I appreciate a good cigar. It's my one vice outside of drinking, which is a job-related thing. Good podcasts and audiobooks. I've discovered those mainly because of my schedule. I think everybody needs to get into audiobooks and podcasts way more. I think a lot of people force themselves to try and read when they're audio learners. For me, again, go for a walk with the dog, listen to a podcast, an audiobook in the car. I don't listen to music very much at all anymore. But that being said, This is going to be another weird one. Australian hip hop. Everybody needs a little more Australian hip hop in their life.
Okay, so give us some artists.
Do yourself a favor. YouTube Australian hip hop. Hit the first mix. You won't regret it.
Give us a few artists that we should check out.
Hilltop Hoods for sure.
Okay.
Hilltop Hoods for sure. Bliss and Esso and Illy. ILLY.
I feel like
Bliss and Esso.
I feel like I know Illy. But I'll check her out. Him or her?
Listen, so there's actually a video where they do a music video in Victoria and Vancouver.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, down by the big W on top on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a whole music video around that, and in Victoria as well.
Oh, amazing, man. So cool.
And then
go for it.
Number 6.
Yeah.
Number 6. Find a good mentor early on. Find someone you can text whenever you have some doubts or something. That probably should be higher in the list. But I didn't grow up with a mentor. The industry was the cocktail scene, especially in Australia, was so young that you sort of always had to sort of like teach yourself, and there was no internet, so you had to get books. So you always were teaching yourself, and to try and get people on board with that when there is no internet, it's not easy. Right. So in 97, 98, there wasn't really cocktail culture anywhere outside of New York and San Francisco, London sort of thing. But now I have mentors that I can literally drop a text to right now and say I'm having a shitty day, and they'll give me a call wherever they are.
Can we share any names that have been really instrumental for you?
Philip Duff is probably my number one guy. Philip Duff in the US. We met in 2010 at Clive's. He came out to do a big event, and then I did 4 big events with him in France back in the day. And I was basically his right-hand guy, traveling around Europe for 3 weeks at a time. But he's always been a guy that, like, I remember when I was opening up FTW, I was freaking out and dropped him a text like, dude, I'm panicking. And he just dropped me this big long text that just put my mind at ease.
Right.
And I was ready to rock and roll. And so Phil's been a big one. Gary Reagan was always a big influence on me too. I could always call Gary and just have a chin wag with him. And then here in Victoria, Solomon Siegel at Pagliacci's.
Yeah.
He's my best friend, and we've been through a ton together, and we still bounce each other off, and we've got the same birthday and the same initials. So it's sort of...
I like that. The second question I have for you, sir, is the half a dozen haven't yets. So same ilk, I need 1 to 6 things, kind of like a bucket list of things you've yet to experience. Obviously, you talked about you're looking at doing kind of the version 2 of the book you just released in October. So that's coming up. So that's kind of something you haven't done yet. But are there other things that are pressing for you that you want to get done before that day comes?
Take a little bit more time off and enjoy time with my family a little bit more. Even now, I'm still working my ass off every single day. Something I don't do. I don't take enough vacations with my family. I'm just always constantly. So I need to force myself to do that a little bit more. I want to get a 1957 Porsche convertible.
Ooh, nice. What color?
Hey?
What color?
It would have to be like a deep, dark, metallic green.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my dream retirement car, I suppose. I want to go home. I haven't been home since I left Australia, so it's been 14 years since I left Australia. So I haven't gone home since then. And something that's on my bucket list that I haven't been home to my family and friends since I came over here.
Wow, that's a long time, man.
Yeah, I feel to a degree that I moved over here when I was 26, and I sort of grew up over here, I suppose. Like you get out of that like early 20s and partying with your friends all the time. I grew up here in Canada, so I sort of I got away from that partying all the time scene, so it sort of detached me from my mates, and they all came over for my wedding and everything when I got married. But yeah, it's been 14 years since I came home. I went home, so that's a big one for me. I really want to go to South America.
Okay.
I want to explore Central and South America way more than I already have, and go to as many distilleries in those regions as I possibly can. I want to do my wedding vows with my wife again.
Nice.
We've been married for over 10 years ago, and last year while I was in Singapore was our 10-year anniversary. So I'd like to do our vows again because she's been ridiculously good to me. And then, yeah, I think just continue sort of building the industry out. Like this industry is a hobby, a passion. Like I it defines me so much without defining me, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I try and extend my bandwidth as much as possible so I can try and do as many podcasts I can and videos I can and articles and stuff like that. So like I'm trying to figure out ways and creative ways to sort of build out that to try and help out more and more, because you can get very self-conscious when you put out so much thing, because you start worrying about likes and comments and all this sort of stuff and how many times you have podcasts to listen to and stuff like that. But it's that once every 3 months when someone drops you a message and goes, really thanks for that. Like that I had a really shitty day at work today and that helped me out. Mm-hmm. I think it's more like self-gratitude instead of gratification. I talk about that a bit, but like trying to find that like it makes me happy. So me giving out as much information as I possibly can and helping out as many people, regardless if it may not be the clicks in Vancouver or the clicks in Toronto. It might be this kid in Saskatchewan who's like, oh, so I can be I can make money from this industry and exceed away from being a bartender because my mom wants me to go to university.
Right. That's great advice, man. And I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate how you approach what you do. And I'm super, super thankful for you taking time right now to come on my show and share your knowledge with me and the listeners. It means so much. And I feel, I mean this sincerely, I feel very assured that our industry has people like you in it that are here to support those that are willing to reach out and ask for help. And something you said earlier in the podcast was, for so long, it's been kind of this ego thing where we haven't been that vulnerable. And I think a big piece of it is we haven't always asked for help. So I want to say right now to the listeners, if you're out there right now and you have a business or you're thinking about getting into the industry, please reach out to someone like Shawn and just download information from his brain, because I think we all can benefit from that. So Shawn, thank you so much for doing what you do, and thank you for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. So it's nice when you get to a certain degree in your career, it's hard to find kindred spirits. Mm-hmm. I listen to your podcast on a regular basis, but it was the one in the park the other day that just like it hit me in a place that I was just like, oh, okay. So someone's not because I've had so many people ask me all these questions.
Right.
Like, I don't know all the answers yet. And then I listen to your podcast. I'm like, oh, shit, great. Someone else doesn't know all the answers quite yet either.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And it took me a while to kind of look in the mirror and say, like, I don't know, because for so long, I've been able to and enjoy creating and coming up with ways to get out of a corner. And with what we're facing right now, our currently reality is, and I sit there a lot of my day thinking, like, what can I do? How can I change the current reality? And I know the very least I can do is lock myself in my front hall closet and get on a podcast with you and just chat like, hey, what are you doing? What are you experiencing? What are you seeing? What have you done? What do you think? And I know that the more you and I do this, more others do this, we're going to find answers and we're going to find a way to make this all better. So again, thank you so much for being open to this. I would love to do round 2 with you at some point as well. And before I officially let you go and get back to your evening, if you want to reach out in regards to your consulting work or find out more about your books or more about your podcast, how best they find you and engage with you with those channels? Probably
the best place is just to go to my website, and I'll give you the easy one because it's just www.shawnsoole.com.
Right, and Soole is Soole?
L-E.
Yeah.
ShawnSoole.
Yeah, Shawn with an H and a W and 2 O's and the L and the E. Perfect.
That's the one.
Shawn, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I say it a lot on the podcast. I haven't said it for a while because I haven't had a guest. I've been doing just me, but I'm a firm believer that time is the most valuable thing that we have. So from the bottom of my heart and the listeners, thank you for giving your time to me and the podcast. It means the absolute world, dude. Thank you.
It was amazing. Thank you, Brad.
And you guys don't know this that are listening. Shawn's having issues with my audio on his end. So I want to say personally, thank you for putting up with the poor audio. I apologize.
No problems at all.
Okay, guys, that is it from me. That is Shawn. I am Brad. This is the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast. For those of you that are listening, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. For those of you that are in the industry right now, hang on. This will get better. And if you need anything at all, please reach out to myself or Shawn as well. And we are there to help as much as we possibly can. And you know what to do until next time, guys. Be good and do good. That's it. We're out. You did it, dude. You crushed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, buddy. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you.
Anything you need, just hit me up, yeah?
Yeah.
It's just like that as we proceed. And we out here. Luxurious limoncellos, what we bout here. Tahiti violin vibrations, no doubt here. Celebrations and salutations, and we out here. It's just like that as we proceed. Introducing Cadillac of poetry, finesse and slalom slopes down the wavy west coast, making toasts and this special dedication. Up another level, levitation. It's yoga, heavy metal meditation. Floating only upwards, only tenderonis when homies open up the cupboards. Triple kiss fam, subtle signal, prosecco in the pail, getting carried in all white linen suits. Still y'all pale in comparison, y'all stale in comparison. Embarrassing the suave, see them set off in St. Lucia and then sail into Paris. And they bakey, flaky, pastry, paisley, rug on my back, laying flat, getting reiki, K-pasta, steak.